Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyofacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyofacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and I am joined today by my co-host, Cheryl.
Hi.
In the last couple of years, we have started checking off some bucket list cruises. Given that they are bucket list destinations, vessels, or both, it is little surprise that several of those bucket list checkoffs made it onto this list. And as we have a number of bucket list cruises in front of us, I suspect this list will evolve over time. Like later this year, our next cruise is a bucket list trip to the Panama Canal on Holland America Lines flagship, Rotterdam. And if what I have researched turns out to be the case, I suspect it too will crack our top 10. This is an absolutely subjective list. Not just that it is our opinion only, but it is offered from the perspective of non-professional reviewers. We don't have a YouTube channel, so I don't go over ships anywhere near as comprehensively as many of those content creators. We just thought it would be fun to do. Exactly half of the top 10 that made our list were before the podcast was created, and the other half have been since the podcast, and thus we have done a reflections podcast for each of the 5 on the list that have occurred since the podcast started 2.5 years ago. So you can check them out if you missed them. There were a few notable omissions from our top 10 list. For instance, a recent cruise on one of our favorite cruise line's newest ship, the Celebrity Ascent. How can that be? Another one missing, and you know how much I love music and themed cruises, is the Maxwell Cruise. It was perfect in every way with Robert Glasper and others, but was only 4 days, too short to crack the top 10. My biggest complaint on the comments card for that cruise, and I am sure many others said the same, it was too short. And they did add a day the following year, which also sold out. I'm sure that great cruise will become a 7-day cruise in the future.
No question that sentiment influenced the list somewhat, but we tried hard not to allow sentimental value to have undue weight on our choices. I think we did a good job on that. If we had not, several cruises would have cracked the top 10 because of sentimental value alone. Like our first time ever traveling together. We cruised in 1988 on Royal Caribbean, Sovereign of the Seas. We ended up marrying shortly thereafter. Or when we took our 2 grandchildren, then ages 4 and 9, on their first cruise, which was on Disney Magic. Or perhaps the most sentimental cruise of all is when Paul and I flew up to New York from Florida, where we were residing then, and took our daughters, son-in-law, grandkids on Royal Caribbean, Anthem of the Seas, for Christmas 2018. That cruise was the genesis of Paul's first cruising book, The Joy of Cruising, and was chronicled in the closing chapter. So, in reverse order, here we go. Coming in at number 10, our 2022 cruise on Royal Caribbean, Symphony of the Seas. There are few cruises we have ever taken where we approached the cruise with so much anticipation. We loved the Royal Caribbean Oasis class having previously sailed on Harmony of the Seas. So we somewhat knew what to expect, which explains part of our anticipation. We knew it was going to be a lot of fun, some good food, unparalleled aqua show, and of course, it was huge. It was the largest ship in the world at the time we booked it. The main reason for the anticipation, though, was because this was our first cruise back after the COVID lockdown.
Yes, my eyes watered over as we boarded. It was back to where we belonged. We wanted a special vessel for our first cruise back, which is why we chose the largest ship in the world when we booked. Although, by the time we boarded Symphony, it was surpassed in size by its sister ship, Wonder of the Seas. Besides just being back on the ocean, a highlight of that cruise is for the first time we indulged by purchasing the unlimited dining package, and thus did exclusively specialty and casual dining and never stepped foot in the dining rooms. Coming in at number 9, Carnival Mardi Gras, which was one of those cruises we set our sights on during the COVID lockdown. A roller coaster on a ship? We had to experience that with my granddaughter Lakai. She was our cruising partner and had gone on 5 straight cruises with us. Mardi Gras was to be the 6th, and then COVID happened. So after COVID, we reunited for Lakai's 13th birthday. There was a lot to love on Mardi Gras. In addition to the boat roller coaster, especially was the new Emerald's restaurant, which we learned to love in New Orleans. And it introduced us to Shaq's Big Chicken, which is now my favorite fast food outlet at sea. Sure wish we had one in my city.
Number 8, Festival at Sea on Celebrity Equinox, checked several boxes for us. It was our first time on board a Celebrity cruise ship. Celebrity is considered a premium cruise line, and up to then, we had only sailed on mainstream cruise ships. The difference was immediately noticeable. I mean, on the top deck was real grass. It was our first theme cruise. It was a full ship charter put on each year by San Francisco's Blue World Travel, whose president, Patricia Yarborough, a historic entrepreneur, has been on the podcast. Festival at Sea is the first African-American cultural cruise, and it is offered annually and has had 35 consecutive years, pausing for COVID, of sold-out full ship charters. It's packed with fun and cultural activities including fashion, competitions, an iconic event involving single men whose proceeds go to the United Negro College Fund, cultural events, music, and lots of comedy. The year we sailed Festival at Sea, the music acts were Anthony Hamilton, En Vogue, and Avant. Comedy included the host Damon Williams, who also has been on the podcast, Gary Owen, and AJ Jamal. Festival at Sea felt like a massive family reunion. And the cherry on top, our granddaughter Lakai, 9 at the time, loved it. Paul included an extensive feature of Festival at Sea in his first cruising book, The Joy of Cruising.
Number 7 was our only transatlantic cruise, from Miami to Barcelona on Virgin Voyages Scarlet Lady. We loved almost everything about the cruise. Emphasis on almost. The first 8 days of the trip were sea days. That was fine for me, but a bit much for Cheryl. Around day 5, she would randomly, I think jokingly, say, "I need land, I need land, I need land." In the ensuing days, she would say it in a less joking manner. Those sea days enabled us to appreciate all that Scarlet Lady has to offer. And that was a lot. All food was included, and it was easily the best included food we have ever had up to that point. And several of their restaurants competed favorably with specialty restaurants that we had to pay for on other lines. Shows were varied and interesting, with some hits and misses. A great show, unlike any we have ever experienced, was by a hypnotist, Nadine Manuel, who has been on the Joy of Cruising podcast. Another guest on the podcast from this cruise was Dixie Crystals, the Scarlet Lady's diva, a drag performer that serves as kind of but not exactly a cruise director, and perhaps Virgin Voyage's most conspicuous symbol of its well-known cheeky nature versus other cruise lines. The diva may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I enjoyed her. She was funny and talented, and her podcast episode was an absolute hit. I liken Virgin Voyages as a playground for adults. First of all, there's no kids allowed. And there is actually adult-sized playground equipment on the top deck. I mean, Cheryl and I seesawed and pushed each other on swings. And I'm sure you've heard about their trademark red hammocks on each balcony.
We'll be right back.
Do you have a dream car? Mine is the Lucid Air. Are you intrigued by electric vehicles? The Lucid Air EV has been called the best driving car in the world. And the Lucid Air Sapphire is certifiably the fastest production car in the world. Listen to Lucid Driver Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts or at luciddriver.buzzsprout.com.
Number 6, Explorer Journeys. Explorer 1. This is the most recent cruise we took, and it checked off a bucket list aspiration of ours, which was a luxury cruise. It was a small ship, and there were less than 700 passengers on the voyage. The 10-day itinerary was called A Journey to Barrier Reefs of Mexico, Belize, and Honduras, with 5 port stops. To be honest, the destinations, as nice as they were really secondary to the ship itself for us. Our suite was almost twice the size of a typical cabin, and the balcony was large enough to have a full-size sofa lounger. My understanding is that the owners fashioned its ships, and there are only 2 now, Explorer 1, which we sailed, and the identical Explorer 2, along the lines of a boutique hotel, and they hired their staff primarily from the hotel industry rather than other cruise lines. Accordingly, we found the service to be impeccable. Both Explorer 1 and 2 are small ships, each with a capacity of 950, and Explorer Journeys claims they won't sail at capacity. I think once during our week-and-a-half course on Explorer 1, we were in the elevator with another passenger. They also had a number of unique spaces, including several rectangular-shaped, long infinity hot tubs spread around the ship, and we were able to seclude ourselves from others. Their main bar looked like something you might find at a top-tier hotel, with a small book for the drinks menu. A bartender there, a gentleman from India, told us that he came from the top hotel in India, and that some of the drinks in the menu were created by him and other bartenders hired from the hotel industry. One memorable conversation piece was its massive, gyroscopically leveling pool table. It was a huge pool table. We were chatting with a couple we met playing on it. Paul opined that its cost was in the $40,000 range, and one couple playing thought it was in the hundreds of $1,000s. What do you think? Text us. There are so many good things to say about the Explorer Journeys, but for us, what really set it apart from any line we had ever been on was its food. They had 5 gourmet quality restaurants, all but one included, and virtually nothing was held back. Caviar and foie gras, which is duck liver, lobster, and much more. We're not eating at one of the specialty restaurants. An option for any meal was the included 24-hour room service, which we availed ourselves of every day for a full breakfast. The other option for 3 meals a day was a food hall type place called the Emporium Marketplace, easily the best of its kind at sea. Besides grilled lobster tails every night, a sushi station, salad station, and now our new choice of best pizza at sea, overtaking its sister line of MSC. We have vowed never to repeat ships. However, Explorer Journeys will test that vow.
Coming in at number 5, the Smooth Jazz Cruise on Celebrity Millennium was nirvana every day. Even before we embarked, we were very excited because we sailed with 2 of our best friends from back in grad school. I last traveled with Paris and Panther, 2 couples in Jamaica before we discovered cruising almost 40 years ago. The cruise contained a veritable who's who of smooth jazz, over 50 musicians in all, including Marcus Miller, Boney James, Jonathan Butler, Brian Culbertson, Gerald Albright, Kenny Dolfer, Take 6, Vanessa Williams, and I can go on and on and on. Comedy was supplied by Alonzo Bolden, one of my favorites. When they were not performing, there was very little separation between the guests and the performers. I walked up to sax star Vincent Ingala, who was just standing by himself jamming to one of the performances, and I engaged him in a conversation. I had recently started the Joy of Cruising podcast, and Vince agreed to be my guest on only the 3rd episode of the podcast. I stopped guitar virtuoso Peter White in the buffet and got him to take a photo with me, which promptly was inserted in my latest book, The Joy of Cruising Again. I kicked myself for not asking him to be on the podcast, but considering the setting, the man might have been hungry and I was between him and the food. We ran into Michael McDonald coming out of the elevator and lassoed him for a photo, which is also in my book. Yeah, the Smooth Jazz Cruise had a nice itinerary that we hardly recall, and the Celebrity Millennium cruise ship was nice enough, but the itinerary and the ship are clearly secondary when it comes to music cruises. There was music everywhere. Of course, the main theater, Lido deck, smaller lounges, and in the evenings, the main dining room was converted to a jazz club. We would not hesitate to do one of the 2 smooth jazz cruises scheduled each year again. Coming in at number 4, also a theme cruise, the Soul Train cruise on Holland America Line. Cheryl and I boarded the Soul Train cruise for the first, but not the last time earlier this year. I say not the last time so assuredly because we booked for 2026 while still aboard the 2025 cruise. It was that good. It was very similar to the Smooth Jazz Cruise in that it was brimming with recognizable music stars who we have listened to and seen live over the years. And music was available at virtually every venue on the ship at all hours of the day. One major difference is that the performers in the Smooth Jazz Cruise are all in their prime. Most of the headliners on the Soul Train cruise are from back in the day when they appeared on the Soul Train TV show, when in their prime. Consequently, many of a group's members are no longer touring with the group. So typically, the groups at the Soul Train cruise are composed of a few or maybe even one original member and some young, vibrant replacements. And they jam just like back in the day. And then there's artists like superstar R&B crooner Charlie Wilson, who appeared on Soul Train back in the day with the Gap Band and now puts on a rollicking show as a solo headliner. Adding to the performers from back in the day are some contemporary R&B performers like Carol Riddick and bands, nonstop comedy, and outstanding DJs. It doesn't stop there. The soul food influenced menus were so outstanding, I invited the 4 celebrity chefs who are part of the Soul Train Cruise production to come on the Joy of Cruising podcast, episode 184, back in May. There were a lot of fun activities like superhero costume parties, dress-up night featuring your best sneakers, fitness classes, worship services, seminars with the stars, and more. But the star was the music. The Brothers Johnson, Lakeside, Zap Band, Shalimar, Earth, Wind, and Fire All-Stars, and many, many more. And music was everywhere and virtually nonstop. The whole experience was so great that we did something we have never done before. I waited in a line for several hours, at least I was able to sit as the line slowly moved along, and purchased tickets for the next year's cruise. At least while I was in that line, I could listen to live music as we were just down the corridor from the main theater. So I grooved to the stylistics while Cheryl went in and watched the show. We fully expect next year's Soul Train cruise will surpass this one. We know the chefs now, so we'll interact with them. I established a rapport with several of the comedians as I tried to get them on the podcast, and I know that most of them will be back next year. And then there is the 2026 lineup. Morris Day and the Time, Johnny Gill, the Ohio Players, Kool and the Gang, Jeffrey Osborne, Third World, Ruben Studdard, Jimmy Jam, and many more.
Number 3 was our Mediterranean cruise on Celebrity Beyond. There are a lot of reasons this cruise made our top 10. It really was an easy choice. First of all, and I know at the beginning Paul mentioned we didn't want sentimentality overly influence our ranking of cruises. This cruise was in celebration of our 30th anniversary. In fact, we started the vacation with a week stay in the countryside of Tuscany, Italy. Italy's excellent train system enabled us to travel to Florence, which we loved. Paul purchased a killer leather black backpack, which he loved. And of course, we saw Michelangelo's David. And on another day, we went to Venice and took a gondola ride. We were enjoying Venice so much that we missed our train back to our resort. After Tuscany, we drove to Rome and spent a few days touring there, including visiting the Vatican, Sistine Chapel, and the Colosseum, and ate too much pizza and gelato. And then we boarded the Celebrity Beyond. What an appropriate name for the cruise ship, because it was truly beyond any cruise we had ever been on. It was an absolute gorgeous ship. If you have never been on a Celebrity Edge class ship, we urge you to add it to your bucket list. We had a very port-intensive itinerary, 8 stops in 3 countries, Italy, France, Spain, on a 9-day cruise. This was a perfect introduction to Europe for Paul, who had never been before. Celebrity had the best food, main dining room, buffet, and specialty restaurants we had experienced on any cruise ship, at least up until that point. And one meal we had in a specialty restaurant, Le Voyage by Daniel Ballard, the Michelin-rated world-renowned French chef. That was the best meal we had at sea. I have heard Paul say it was the best restaurant meal he had ever had, land or sea. After Beyond, it was an easy decision for us to book its successor, Celebrity Ascent, late last year.
Number 2 was Fire and Ice, Hawaii to Alaska to Vancouver on Norwegian Spirit. Ironically, our second favorite cruise of all time was on the oldest and smallest ship we had ever been on up to that point. Although Spirit was the oldest ship in NCL's fleet, shortly before our cruise, it had undergone a $150 million refurbishment, so the ship looked great. Nevertheless, we would never get on such a small old vessel under normal circumstances, mainly because there are so many newer, bigger ships with all the bells and whistles. It's not like we're cruising 10 times per year, so we pick our ships very carefully. So why did we choose NCL Spirit? The itinerary. When I first heard of the Fire and Ice itinerary, I was amazed. It involved a cruise embarking in Honolulu, stopping at each of the major Hawaiian islands, and then 6 sea days up to Alaska, sailing through Glacier Bay and stopping at Icy Point Strait, Skagway, Juneau, and Ketchikan. Both Hawaii and Alaska turned out to be worthy bucket list destinations. And on the flight home, Cheryl and I agreed we have another Alaska cruise in us. We'd like to go back to Hawaii also, but probably on a land trip. We ended the Fire and Ice itinerary in Vancouver, where thanks to a late flight, we were able to do a city tour. And what we saw of Vancouver was beautiful. I have to give credit for turning me on to the Fire and Ice itinerary to Professor Cruz, a major cruise content creator and influencer I featured in my latest book, The Joy of Cruising Again. If you read that book and or listen to Sarah's 2 appearances on the Joy of Cruising podcast, you know that Professor Cruz seemingly specializes in grand itineraries. I recall interviewing her for the book, and when I learned of Sarah's own Fire and Ice experience, I couldn't get the thought out of my head of this dream cruise where I could check off both Hawaii and Alaska from my bucket list. Before The Joy of Cruising Again was even published and The Joy of Cruising podcast was created, we were booked. And when I hosted Sarah early on in the podcast, my tagline in the promo for her episode was mysteriously tongue-in-cheek, I blame Professor Cruz. By the way, experienced cruisers, if you want some ideas of itineraries that are different and really stretch your idea of an immersive cruise experience, Fire and Ice is just one of the many Sarah has embarked on. Our number 1 all-time favorite cruise, Emma Waterways, Emma Christina, by Friends of Festival at Sea. This was a river cruise in southern France that culminated in a 3-day excursion to Paris. It enabled us to check off multiple items on our bucket list and really was a multitude of experiences in a single cruise. First item to check off, this was our first river cruise. And not just any river cruise. We cover river cruises a fair bit here at the Joy of Cruising podcast, and I'm sure that coupled with your own research, it is clear that Emma Waterways is one of the top river cruise lines in the world, with their wonderful fleet, balcony cabins, many with included infinite French balcony sitting room, gourmet cuisine with included wine and beer, and immersive all-included excursions. Not only was this not just any river cruise, but I can take it further and say this was not just any Emma Waterways cruise. You see, Emma Waterways offers a unique series known as Soulful Experience River Cruises, and this was a Soulful Experience cruise. From Emma Waterways' website, Soulful Experiences, celebrating Black history and culture. Join us for one of our specially curated Soulful Experience river cruises. shining a light on Black history and culture along the rivers. Enjoy itinerary, exclusive excursions, exquisite food and wine, and the wonderful feeling that comes from cruising alongside like-minded travelers with a shared heritage and experience. Now, does this mean soulful experiences, river cruises, are only for Blacks? Of course not. In fact, with the exception of full ship charters, the majority of passengers on a soulful experience sailing are typically non-Black. In short, they are traditional Amber Waterways itineraries that include a number of activities, excursions, guest speakers and performers, and even some cuisine that are relevant to or associated with the Black experience as it relates to that part of the world. For instance, our 3 days in Paris included a couple of Black history tours, given Paris's extensive Black history. A second bucket list item we checked off on this cruise was our first opportunity to experience a Friends of Festival at Sea cruise. Some of you are familiar with Festival at Sea. I covered them extensively in my first cruising book, The Joy of Cruising, and Festival at Sea's founder, Patricia Yarbrough, has been a guest on the podcast. We discussed the annual Festival at Sea cruise earlier in this top 10 list. Well, Friends of Festival at Sea is an affiliated brand that offers very high-end cruises to exotic locations every few years. I have long wanted to go on one of these, but most are far too pricey for our budget. Like their recent Regent Seven Seas cruise throughout Southeast Asia that would have set us back $30,000. For this cruise, Friends of Festival at Sea chartered the entire Amber Christina and brought their own DJs, a world-renowned comedian, Damon Williams, who has been a guest on the podcast, jazz artist John Sachs, also a guest on the podcast, and their overall vibe. Finally, what was special about this cruise is I chronicled the entire experience for a Quirky Cruise online magazine, the authority on small ship cruising, and published my first article as a travel writer. I have put a link to the article in the show notes.
Well, that's our list of all-time favorite cruises. This was a lot of fun reminiscing on great memories. To summarize, number 1, Amber Waterways, Amber Christina by Friends of Festival at Sea. Number 2, Fire and Ice, Hawaii to Alaska to Vancouver on the Norwegian Spirit. Number 3, Celebrity Beyond Mediterranean. Number 4, Soul Train Cruise on Holland America Line, New Amsterdam. Number 5, the Smooth Jazz Cruise on Celebrity Millennium. Number 6, Explorer Journeys, Explorer 1. Number 7, Virgin Voyage Scarlet Lady Transatlantic Cruise. Number 8, Festival at Sea on Celebrity Equinox. Number 9, Carnival Mardi Gras. And number 10, Royal Caribbean Symphony of the Seas.
As you know, we are definitely in the bucket list checking stage of our cruising career, so I expect this list to evolve over the next few years. We look forward to revisiting this list in the future. We'd like to hear some of your favorite cruises. If you want to mention your favorite cruises, text the show and we'll read it on the air. Thanks for listening, and as we like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.